At over 450 pounds, King Kong Bundy moved like a man half his size. At his peak, this monster demanded referees count to 5, because 3 seconds wasn't enough to prove his total dominance. But in 2019, the walking condominium would face his final opponent, and this time, not even a 5 count could save him. In 1955, Chris Alan Pallies was born in Woodbury, New Jersey. Growing up, Chris was always bigger than most kids his age, but he wasn't just big. He was a natural athlete who dominated in amateur wrestling, winning 2 regional championships before graduating in 1974. After high school, Chris headed to Larry Sharp's Monster Factory Wrestling School in Belmar, New Jersey, the place where giants were made. On March 7, 1981, he debuted in the World Wrestling Federation as Chris Kanyon, scoring his first victory against Strong Kobayashi 4 months later. But it was in Texas, with world-class championship wrestling, where Chris Pallies would transform into the legendary King Kong Bundy. Chris Pallies started out as Big Daddy Bundy, but that name was just the beginning. Everything changed when he got into a nasty feud with Texas wrestling's royal family, the Von Erichs. That's when he joined forces with the smooth-talking manager Gary Hart, who saw something special in the big man. Hart knew exactly what to do. He rebranded his massive wrestler as King Kong Bundy. Just like the famous movie monster, Bundy was huge, intimidating, and impossible to ignore. But sometimes the best things in wrestling happen by accident. During his heated battles with the Von Erichs, Bundy lost his hair in a match. Instead of being a setback, this became his trademark look. That massive, bald head made him stand out from every other wrestler. You couldn't miss King Kong Bundy when he walked into an arena. After making his mark in Texas, Bundy hit the road to become an even better wrestler. He traveled across the country, wrestling in different territories and learning new tricks along the way. In the American Wrestling Association, he terrorized their biggest stars. But his biggest achievement during this time came in Georgia Championship Wrestling. There, he teamed up with a mysterious masked wrestler known as the Superstar, and together they did something incredible. They beat the unstoppable Road Warriors for the NWA National Tag Team Championship. The Road Warriors were considered nearly unbeatable, so this was a huge deal. But it was in Mid-South Wrestling where Bundy came up with something that would make him truly unique. He wasn't satisfied with the regular 3-count pin that every other wrestler used. No, King Kong Bundy demanded the referee count to 5. This wasn't just showing off, it was brilliant psychology. Every time he pinned someone for a 5 count, it sent a clear message to everyone watching. I'm not just beating these guys, I'm destroying them. This 5 count became his calling card, something fans would anticipate every time he stepped into the ring. When King Kong Bundy stormed into the WWF on March 16, 1985, everyone knew something huge was about to happen. The WWF had been running promos for weeks, telling fans that a monster was coming. When Bundy finally stepped through the curtain on Championship Wrestling, jaws dropped. Poor Mario Mancini was in the ring, probably wishing he had called in sick that day. What happened next wasn't just a match. It was a demolition that had fans on the edge of their seats. The loud-mouthed manager Jimmy Hart was grinning from ear to ear, knowing he had just unleashed wrestling's newest nightmare on the WWF. But it was at the very first WrestleMania, in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, where Bundy really made history. His opponent that night was Special Delivery Jones, a tough veteran who'd been in countless battles. But nobody was ready for what happened next. The bell rang, and before the hot dogs in the concession stand could get cold, it was all over. 9 seconds. That's all it took. Bundy crushed SD Jones in the corner with his brutal avalanche splash, followed by his bone-crushing big splash in the middle of the ring. The referee couldn't count fast enough, even with Bundy demanding his trademark 5 count. Wrestling fans had seen quick matches before, but this was different. This was a statement that echoed through the wrestling world. King Kong Bundy wasn't just big, he was unstoppable. All through the summer of 1985, Bundy left a trail of broken opponents across the country. But everything changed in September when Jimmy Hart made a deal that would shake up the wrestling world. He traded Bundy to the greatest manager in wrestling, Bobby the Brain Heenan. The Brain knew exactly what to do with his new monster. He aimed Bundy right at the biggest target possible, the legendary Andre the Giant. Now, challenging Andre wasn't something wrestlers did lightly. The 7'4" giant had been undefeated for 15 years. But Bundy didn't just challenge Andre. He ambushed him during a match and did the unthinkable. He trapped Andre in the corner and delivered splash after devastating splash until Andre's sternum actually cracked under the impact. The message was crystal clear. King Kong Bundy wasn't afraid of giants. He broke them. This wasn't just another wrestling angle. This was the moment Bundy proved he could destroy anyone, no matter how big or legendary they were. The attack on Andre the Giant wasn't just a one-time thing. It kicked off some of the most exciting matches of 1985. Wrestling fans couldn't wait to see these giants clash. It all started heating up on Saturday night's main event, which was a huge deal because wrestling was rarely on network TV back then. On October 3, 1985, everyone tuned in to see an explosive tag team match. In one corner, you had King Kong Bundy teaming up with another giant, Big John Studd. In the other corner stood Andre the Giant, still nursing his injured sternum, alongside the powerhouse Tony Atlas. The building was electric that night. You could feel the tension in the air. But that was just the warm-up. The WWF raised the stakes even higher in the second match when Andre brought in the biggest star in wrestling, the WWF champion himself, Hulk Hogan. Just imagine this scene. Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, probably the two most famous wrestlers in the world, standing together in one corner, while Bundy and Studd, two massive monsters, waited in the other. These matches showed everyone a different side of Bundy. Sure, he was devastating in single matches, but now he was proving he could be just as dominant in tag team action. He wasn't just a solo destroyer. He was a smart wrestler who could work with a partner to take down even the biggest stars in the business. Everything came to a head on September 23, 1985, at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. They called it the Colossal Jostle, and that name wasn't just hype. Picture this: Andre the Giant, all 7'4", and nearly 500 pounds of him, finally getting his hands on Bundy one-on-one. The garden was packed to the rafters. Even though Bundy didn't win the match, something more important happened that night. He proved he belonged in the ring with the legendary Andre the Giant. Remember, very few wrestlers could even stand up to Andre, let alone give him a real fight. But Bundy didn't just stand up to him. He made Andre work harder than he had in years. After that night, nobody could say Bundy was just another big guy. He had earned his place among wrestling's elite monsters. After proving he could hang with Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy had his eyes on an even bigger prize, the WWF Championship around Hulk Hogan's waist. But Bundy didn't just politely challenge Hogan to a match. No, he made a statement that shocked the wrestling world on Saturday night's main event. Together with his massive partner, the Magnificent Morocco, Bundy launched a surprise attack on Hogan that left fans gasping. This wasn't your typical wrestling beatdown. They hit Hogan so hard they actually cracked his ribs. Every time Hogan took a breath in the following weeks, you could see the pain on his face. This wasn't just wrestling storyline stuff. Those bruises were real, and everyone knew it. This brutal attack set the stage for something huge, the main event of WrestleMania 2 on April 7, 1986. But Hogan and Bundy weren't just going to have a regular match. No, they were going to be locked inside a steel cage. The build-up to this match was intense. Every time Bundy appeared on TV, he'd remind everyone how he'd injured Hogan's ribs, promising to finish the job inside the cage. Meanwhile, Hogan was selling those injured ribs, making fans wonder if their hero could possibly survive being trapped in a cage with this monster. When WrestleMania 2 finally arrived, the atmosphere was electric. Just imagine this scene: the massive steel cage lowering around the ring, Bundy's intimidating figure filling one corner, and Hogan, still favoring those injured ribs, pacing in the other. What followed was something wrestling fans still talk about today. Bundy used every inch of that cage, throwing Hogan into the steel, squashing him in corners, and coming incredibly close to winning the title several times. The fans were on their feet, holding their breath with every near fall. Could this be the night Hulkamania died? But just when it looked like Bundy might actually pull it off, Hogan found that supernatural strength he was famous for. Fighting through the pain of his injured ribs, he managed to hit his legendary leg drop. the move that had finished off countless opponents before. Even though Bundy didn't win the title that night, he did something just as important. He helped make WrestleMania feel like the biggest event in wrestling. This wasn't just another match. It was a war between giants that proved WrestleMania was truly wrestling's Super Bowl. After the huge cage match with Hogan, Bundy wasn't done making waves. He teamed back up with his old partner Big John Studd, and together they stumbled into one of the strangest and most fascinating feuds in wrestling history: the mystery of the Machines. Here's where things get really interesting. A group of massive wrestlers started showing up in masks, calling themselves the Machines. The leader was Giant Machine, and something about him seemed really familiar. Bobby the Brain. Heenan started putting the pieces together. He was convinced that Giant Machine was actually Andre the Giant in disguise. See, Andre had been suspended at the time, and Heenan believed this was his clever way of sneaking back into the WWF. Bundy and Studd became like wrestling detectives, trying to prove it was Andre under that mask. Every week, they'd try new ways to expose Giant Machine, measuring his footprints, comparing his moves to Andre's, even trying to rip the mask off during matches. This wasn't just about wrestling anymore. It was like a mystery show mixed with athletics. Fans packed arenas to see these wild six-man tag matches where Bundy, Studd, and Heenan would face different combinations of the Machines and their partners. The matches were full of drama and comedy, with Heenan constantly pointing out evidence that Giant Machine was Andre, while Bundy and Studd tried to unmask their mysterious opponents. But that's not all Bundy was up to during this time. He and Studd set their sights on the WWF Tag Team Champions, the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith, and the Dynamite Kid. Now, this was really interesting because it showed a whole different side of Bundy. The Bulldogs were way smaller but incredibly quick and hard-hitting. Everyone wondered how a monster like Bundy would handle these speedy opponents. But he proved he could do more than just squash people. He adapted his style, showing he could keep up with the Bulldogs' faster pace. Sure, they never won the tag team titles, but these matches proved Bundy wasn't just a one-trick giant. He could work with anybody, big or small, and make the matches exciting. WrestleMania 3 showed fans a side of King Kong Bundy they never expected to see. Instead of battling giants, he found himself in one of the most unusual matches ever, a mixed six-person tag team match involving Little People wrestlers. Bundy teamed up with Little Tokyo and Lord Littlebrook against an odd team of Hillbilly Jim and his partners, the Hang Away. Finally, Bundy had enough. In a moment that made the massive crowd gasp, he grabbed Little Beaver, hoisted him up, and slammed him to the mat. Then came the crushing elbow drop, a move that looked absolutely devastating given the size difference. The referee and partners turned on him. This wasn't just another match. It showed that Bundy could tell a story in the ring and get fans emotionally invested. But 1987 wasn't done with King Kong Bundy yet. He entered the prestigious King of the Ring tournament, proving he had the stamina to wrestle multiple tough matches in a single night. This was a big deal, because most giants couldn't last through several matches like that. Bundy powered his way to the finals, where he faced the flashy and technical Macho Man, Randy Savage. Though Savage eventually won, Bundy showed everyone he could hang with the most skilled wrestlers in the business. Then came one of the biggest moments of late 1987. Bundy actually beat Hulk Hogan. Sure, it was by countout on Saturday night's Main Event 13, but beating Hogan in any way was a huge deal back then. Remember, this is when Hulkamania was at its peak. Even though Hogan got his revenge in the rematch on the next show, that victory proved Bundy was still one of the most dangerous men in wrestling. Anytime he stepped in the ring, fans knew there was a real chance they might see Hulkamania come crashing down. After dominating the WWF for years, Bundy surprised everyone by leaving in early 1988. He mostly stayed away from the big spotlight, showing up here and there in smaller wrestling shows. But you can't keep a monster down forever. In late 1994, wrestling fans' jaws dropped when King Kong Bundy made his return to the WWF. This time, he was part of Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation, a group of wrestlers backed by the $1 Million Man's money. It was like seeing a legend come back to life. His comeback match couldn't have gone better. At the 1994 Survivor Series, Bundy teamed up with another monster, Bam Bam Bigelow. Together, they did something incredible. They were the only survivors in their elimination match against Lex Luger's team of American heroes. For a moment, it felt like the unstoppable Bundy of old was back. But wrestling had changed while Bundy was away. The 1995 Royal Rumble showed just how much. Everyone expected the returning giant to dominate the match. After all, how do you throw someone that big over the top rope? But then something shocking happened. Mabel, another massive wrestler who was on the rise, eliminated Bundy after just 3 minutes. The crowd couldn't believe it. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go for a legend like Bundy. His final WrestleMania moment came at WrestleMania 11, where he faced one of the most intimidating wrestlers ever, The Undertaker. Now, this wasn't quite the same as his legendary cage match with Hogan or his quick victory over SD Jones. But even though Bundy was older now, you could still see flashes of what made him so scary in the first place. When he trapped The Undertaker in the corner for his famous avalanche splash, longtime fans got goosebumps, remembering the monster who had terrorized the WWF in the 1980s. While he didn't win the match, he showed that even in the twilight of his career, King Kong Bundy could still make fans hold their breath whenever he stepped in the ring. After hanging up his wrestling boots, Chris Pallies had to deal with something much tougher than any opponent he'd faced in the ring: the long-term effects of his wrestling career. Like many wrestlers who gave their bodies to entertain fans night after night, Pallies was worried about brain injuries that could affect the rest of his life. He wasn't alone in this fight. Along with other wrestlers, he joined a big lawsuit against WWE, claiming the company hadn't done enough to protect wrestlers from serious head injuries. The lawsuit brought up some heavy issues. It said WWE knew about the dangers of repeated head impacts, but didn't do enough to protect their wrestlers. According to the legal papers, the company didn't just fail to provide proper medical care, they actually tried to hide how serious these injuries could be. This wasn't just about money. It was about wrestling's dark side and the price athletes pay for entertaining fans. Things got complicated when the lawsuit was thrown out by the courts in September 2018. But the effects of this legal battle went beyond the courtroom. Wrestling journalist Anthony Mango from Bleacher Report pointed out something interesting. He believed this lawsuit might be why Pallies never made it into the WWE Hall of Fame. Despite being one of the most memorable big men in wrestling history and helping make WrestleMania the huge event it is today, King Kong Bundy's name was never called for the Hall of Fame. King Kong Bundy wasn't just a monster in the ring. He had a whole other life in the entertainment world. Here's something cool that not everyone knows. The main family in the hit TV show Married with Children wasn't named Bundy by accident. The show's creators were such big wrestling fans that they named the family after King Kong Bundy himself. He even showed up on the show several times, and fans went crazy every time he appeared. But that wasn't his only brush with Hollywood. In the movie Moving, he got to work with comedy legend Richard Pryor. Picture this: the massive King Kong Bundy playing a clumsy mover. It was like seeing your favorite wrestling monster in a whole new light. Then there was Weird Science, where he got to play a wrestling coach. Talk about perfect casting. Who better to teach TV characters about wrestling than a real-life wrestling legend? Later in life, Bundy surprised everyone by stepping onto comedy club stages. That's right. The same guy who demanded 5 counts and crushed opponents in steel cages was now making people laugh on purpose. He traded body slams for punchlines, proving he had a quick wit to match his impressive size. But on March 4, 2019, the wrestling world lost a true giant. Chris Pallies, known to millions as King Kong Bundy, passed away at his home in Glassboro, New Jersey. He was just 63 years old, taken too soon by complications from diabetes. The same town where his incredible journey began now said goodbye to one of wrestling's most unforgettable characters. When we look back at King Kong Bundy's amazing career, we see so much more than just another big guy in wrestling. Before him, most giant wrestlers would just lumber around the ring, using their size and nothing else. Bundy changed all that. Here was a huge man who could move like someone half his size, who could tell stories in the ring, who could make you laugh on TV one day and terrify you in a steel cage the next. Bundy's biggest gift to wrestling was showing future big men what was possible. He showed up in main events at the first 2 WrestleManias, helping make those shows the huge deal they are today. He broke Andre the Giant's sternum, went toe-to-toe with Hulk Hogan in a steel cage, and even made people take little people matches seriously at WrestleMania 3. He could work with anybody, any style, any size, and make it look good. After him, you had to have personality. You had to be able to work with different kinds of opponents. Whenever you see a modern giant wrestler moving quickly or cutting a funny promo, you're seeing a little bit of Bundy's influence. Today's wrestling fans might see clips of King Kong Bundy and think of him as a star from wrestling's past. But for those who saw him in his prime, who felt the arena shake when he hit that corner splash, who counted along as referees got to 5, we know we were watching something special. The walking condominium may be gone, but the blueprint he created for future wrestling giants will stand forever. Rest in peace, King Kong Bundy. And thank you for making us count to 5.